welcome to our deep dive into poor economics.
Yeah.
You know those articles you sent over about global aid?
Yeah.
Well, this book really flips the script on how we think about helping people out of poverty.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's packed with research and stories that challenge common assumptions.
Right.
Think of this as your personal guide to the most important takeaways.
It is a fascinating read.
Yeah.
The authors don't just present data. They really get into the nitty-gritty of why people make the choices they do when resources are scarce.
Okay, so let's jump right in.
Yeah.
One of the first things that struck me was this idea of the poverty trap.
Okay.
Like, are people stuck in poverty because they just don't have the means to climb out?
Right. It's that classic image of someone working so hard just to survive that they can't invest in anything to improve their situation.
Right.
The authors illustrate this using what economists call an S-shaped curve.
Okay.
Imagine drawing an S on a graph. At the bottom of the S, things are flat, meaning even a little effort doesn't get you much progress.
So you're stuck at the bottom of the S and can't get over the hump
Exactly.
to where things start improving.
Exactly. But then the authors throw a wrench in that idea.
Okay.
They share a story about Pak Solan, an unemployed man in Indonesia who was convinced he was too weak from hunger to even look for work.
Yeah.
He believed he was trapped by lack of nutrition.
Whoa, that's a powerful image.
It is.
It makes you wonder how much of a role our physical state plays in our ability to break out of poverty.
Yeah.
But hold on, didn't they also present research that challenges this whole S-curve idea?
They did.
Okay.
Some studies suggest the curve might actually look more like an upside-down L.
Okay.
This means the potential for growth could be highest among the poorest, not the other way around.
So it's more like when you're starting with very little.
Right.
Even a small improvement can have a big impact.
That's one interpretation.
Yeah.
But it's not a simple either-or situation.
Okay. The book digs deeper, suggesting that while nutrition might not trap adults in poverty in the long term, things are different for kids.
I see where this is going.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't get the right nutrition as a child, it can have lasting consequences, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
The book highlights a study where kids in Kenya who got deworming treatment ended up with significantly higher lifetime incomes.
Wow.
That's huge E.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So it's about the quality of food as much as the quantity.
Right.
Especially for kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It makes you think about how we approach food aid.
Right.
It's not just about filling bellies.
Right.
It's about providing the right nutrients for growing minds and bodies.
It changes the whole conversation about food policy.
Exactly.
But, you know, it's not just about food.
Right.
One of the things that really jumped out at me was the book's emphasis on the importance of a good job.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, wait, are you saying even those jobs that seem kind of bad, like low-paying factory work, can actually be a good thing?
Well, let's look at the data.
Okay.
The authors share a story about a whole family whose lives were transformed by access to jobs at a zinc factory.
Okay.
Having that one steady income created this ripple effect of positive changes.
Yeah.
And they back this up with research comparing the impact of factory jobs to the Green Revolution.
You mean that massive effort to boost agricultural production?
Yeah.
I would have thought that would have a bigger impact on poverty.
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But surprisingly, the study found factory employment had a bigger impact on wages, especially for the poorest.
Wow.
It even outpaced the gains from the Green Revolution.
That's crazy. So are they saying industrial jobs are a better path out of poverty than focusing on agriculture?
It's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
But it definitely raises important questions about development strategies.
Okay.
And there's another study they cite about Mexican mothers working in maquiladoras.
Those factories known for low wages and tough conditions.
Yeah, not exactly a dream job.
Right. But here's the thing. The study found that even though these jobs were tough, the children of those mothers actually grew significantly taller.
Hold on, just because their mothers had these factory jobs.
Yeah.
Even in those conditions.
It highlights just how crucial income is in breaking the cycle of poverty.
Right.
It allows families to afford better nutrition and provides stability, which has positive ripple effects on the next generation.
Yeah.
It makes you rethink what a good job really means.
So maybe it's not just about the wage itself, but the opportunities and stability it creates.
Exactly.
It gives families the breathing room to think about the future
and
invest in things like education or healthcare. It's not just about surviving, it's about thriving.
Exactly. And speaking of healthcare,
Okay.
the book uncovers some fascinating insights about how people access and perceive healthcare in the context of poverty.
All right, let's dive into that. The book mentioned a survey in Udaipur, India, right?
Yeah.
Something about people choosing to pay for healthcare when there were free options available.
Right.
That doesn't make a lot of sense on the surface.
Right. You'd think people struggling financially would jump at the chance for free healthcare.
Yeah.
But the authors dig into the reasons behind this seemingly irrational behavior.
Okay.
And it turns out it's a lot more complex than we might assume. It all boils down to trust perception and, well, the bit of human nature. The book talks about how people in Udaipur often saw free public health care as lower quality. They'd rather spend their limited money on private doctors or even traditional healers who they felt understood their needs better.
So it's not just about the cost.
Right.
It's about the perceived value and a sense of trust in the provider.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense now. But wasn't there also something about the way doctors in India interact with patients, both in public and private settings?
Oh, right. The 3-3-3 rule. Imagine going to the doctor and they only have 3 minutes for you.
Oh, wow.
They barely check anything and just throw pills at the problem. That's the reality for many people in India, regardless of whether they're using public or private healthcare.
Wow. That's disheartening. But why is it like that?
The book suggests a few reasons. First, there's a lack of understanding of basic health concepts.
Okay.
Then there's the power of the placebo effect. People often feel better just because they've received some kind of treatment, even if it's not scientifically proven. And of course, there's the profit motive for private providers who benefit from prescribing more medications.
It's like a perfect storm of factors that create this less than ideal healthcare system. But wait, didn't the book also talk about a successful immunization program in India? It seems like they managed to overcome some of these challenges.
Absolutely. This is where things get really interesting. Seva Mandir, an NGO, ran a program where they offered small incentives for each immunization, things like 2 pounds of dal, which are dried beans, a staple food in the area.
Okay.
And get this, if families completed the whole course, they received stainless steel plates.
Hold on, they gave people food and plates to get them to vaccinate their kids. That sounds a bit weird.
I know, right? But here's the kicker. It worked. Offering those seemingly small incentives actually increased immunization rates 7-fold.
7-fold?
Yeah.
Seriously? So it's like, forget complex public health campaigns, just give people some dal and they'll line up for vaccine.
No, it's not quite that simple. The incentives address 2 key barriers, procrastination and immediate needs. People knew vaccines were important, but they often put them off because of more pressing daily concerns. The dal and the plates provided a tangible, immediate benefit that outweighed the perceived cost of taking time out of their day to get their kids vaccinated.
So it wasn't about laziness or ignorance.
Right.
It was about understanding the realities of their lives and finding a way to make it easier for them to do what they already knew was important. That's brilliant.
And it speaks to a broader point. The book makes small, carefully designed nudges can have a huge impact, especially when they're aligned with people's real-life situations.
It makes you wonder how we can apply this idea to other areas, like encouraging people to save more. Speaking of savings, the book talks about those unfinished houses you see in developing countries, right?
Right.
The ones that are like a symbol of aspirations and limitations all rolled into one.
Right. Those houses perfectly represent the challenges the poor face when it comes to saving. It's not that they don't want to save. They often lack access to formal saving systems. And easy ways to put money aside, think about it. You probably have a bank account, maybe a retirement plan, all these systems that automatically deduct money from your paycheck and make saving effortless. The poor don't always have access to those same structures.
It's like the system is set up to make it harder for them to save.
Yeah.
But then there's that whole idea that the poor are just bad with money or lack self-control, right? I'm always a bit wary of those kinds of generalizations.
The book challenges that stereotype, too. They share a story about Ben Sedan, a Moroccan farmer, diligently saving every penny for his son's education. He's a perfect example of how the poor are just as determined and future-oriented as anyone else. They just face different obstacles.
So what makes saving so hard for them?
The book introduces the concept of a temptation tax. The idea is that self-control is a limited resource, and the poor simply have less of it to go around because their lives are filled with constant stress and difficult choices. It's not that they don't want to save, it's that the pressures of daily survival make it incredibly hard to resist immediate needs.
So it's like saying it's easier to resist that candy bar when you know you have a fully stocked pantry at home.
Exactly. It's all about context, and this shifts the conversation from blaming the poor to understanding the structural barriers they face. It makes you think about how we can design systems that make it easier for them to save, like those commitment savings accounts you mentioned earlier.
All right, those accounts that essentially lock your money away until you reach a specific goal. I remember reading about those. They seem like a great way to help people overcome that temptation tax. But I'm curious, are there other ways we can make it easier for people to make good financial decisions?
Well, the book spends a lot of time discussing how poverty affects people's mental bandwidth. It's like their minds are constantly bombarded with stressful decisions and trade-offs. Do I buy medicine or food today? Do I fix the leaky roof or send my kid to school? It's exhausting.
You're saying poverty is mentally draining. I guess I never really thought about it that way.
It's like they're running a mental marathon every single day, and this constant cognitive strain can make it harder to think clearly, plan for the future, and make sound financial decisions. It's not about intelligence or willpower. It's about having the mental space to think strategically.
That's a really insightful point. So if we want to help people escape poverty, we need to find ways to reduce that cognitive load.
Right. Exactly. And the book offers some interesting examples of how this can be done. For instance, something as simple as sending reminders about important deadlines or simplifying bureaucratic processes can free up mental bandwidth and allow people to make better decisions. Even providing clear and concise information can make a huge difference.
So it's about recognizing the mental burden poverty places on people and finding ways to make their lives a little easier, a little less overwhelming.
Precisely. And this leads to another key insight. The power of simplification complexity can be paralyzing, especially when you're already dealing with so much stress.
It's trying to figure out a complicated government form when you're worried about where your next meal is coming from.
Exactly. The book highlights programs that have succeeded by simplifying processes, making information more accessible, and reducing the number of choices people have to make. This applies to everything from financial products to healthcare to education.
It's like that saying, keep it simple, stupid. Sometimes the most effective solutions are the ones that are easiest to understand and use. But I'm also thinking about those articles you sent that talk about aid programs failing because they don't really understand the needs of the people they're trying to help.
Didn't the book touch on that?
Oh, absolutely. It brings up a crucial point. The danger of paternalism. It's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking we know what's best for the poor and that we need to tell them what to do, but the book pushes back against that. It argues that the poor are the ultimate experts on their own lives.
It's about respecting their agency and recognizing they have a deep understanding of their own challenges and aspirations.
Exactly. And the book argues that the most effective solutions are the ones that empower people to make their own choices, to take control of their own destinies, rather than being passive recipients of aid. So it's about listening to them, understanding their needs, and providing them with the tools and information they need to make informed decisions. Which brings up the age-old debate, what's the best way to fight poverty markets or government intervention? Where does the book land on that?
Well, it doesn't shy away from acknowledging the shortcomings of both approaches. We've seen how markets can sometimes exploit the poor, and we've seen how government programs can be inefficient or even corrupt.
Right, neither system is perfect.
But the book also sees the potential for both to play a positive role. It argues that markets can be powerful engines of growth and innovation, but they need to be regulated and structured in a way that benefits everyone, including the poor.
So it's about creating a level playing field, ensuring fair competition, and protecting consumers from exploitation.
Precisely, and governments have a crucial role to play in providing those essential public goods like education, healthcare, and infrastructure, and creating a safety net for the most vulnerable.
It's about finding the right balance between fostering economic opportunity and ensuring social protection. So it's not an either-or situation. It's about leveraging the strengths of both markets and governments.
Exactly. And this leads to another important theme in the book, the need for evidence-based policymaking. It's about moving beyond ideology and letting the data guide our decisions. We need to test our assumptions, be willing to admit when we're wrong, and constantly adapt our approaches based on what we learn.
It's about being humble and realizing we don't always have the answers we need to experiment, learn, and adjust as we go.
And that brings us to one of the most important takeaways from the book, the need to move beyond those grand narratives about poverty and embrace a more granular understanding.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in generalizations and simplistic solutions that sound good in theory, but don't actually work in practice.
The book encourages us to move beyond those tendencies and embrace a more nuanced, context-specific approach. We need to get down to the ground level, understand the specific challenges people face, and tailor our solutions to those specific needs.
It's about recognizing that every situation is different, and that there's no one-size-fits-all solution to poverty. So we've covered a lot of ground here. What are some of the specific policy recommendations the authors offer based on all these insights? So we've seen how poor economics challenges our assumptions about poverty and really pushes us to think about solutions in a new light. But what does that actually look like in practice? What kind of policies are they advocating for?
Well, one of the big takeaways is the idea of investing in human capital. It's not just about giving handouts, it's about creating opportunities for people to lift themselves out of poverty.
Like giving them the tools and resources they need to succeed in the long run.
Exactly. Things like quality education, accessible healthcare, and reliable infrastructure. These are the foundations for a thriving society where everyone has a chance to reach their full potential.
It's about creating a level playing field, not just putting a Band-Aid on the problem, but I'm also thinking about those smaller, more targeted interventions the book talks about. Those seem to play a big role too, right?
Absolutely. Things like microfinance, which can give people access to small loans to start businesses, or conditional cash transfers, which can incentivize families to invest in their children's health and education. These programs can have a huge impact on people's lives.
It's like using those little nudges we were talking about earlier to create positive change. But the book also stresses the importance of tackling those structural barriers that make it harder for people to escape poverty, right?
You're right. Things like the lack of access to formal savings mechanisms or the complexities of dealing with bureaucracy, these are huge obstacles for many people.
It's like this system is rigged against them in some ways. So what can be done to address those issues?
Well, the book argues for simplifying processes, increasing transparency, and making information more readily available. It's about making it easier for people to navigate the system and access the resources they need.
It's about empowering people to take control of their lives rather than feeling trapped by a system that's too complicated or unfair.
Exactly, and ultimately the authors emphasize that there's no magic bullet when it comes to fighting poverty. It's a complex problem that requires a multifaceted approach.
It's about understanding the nuances, challenging assumptions, and constantly adapting our strategies based on what we learn.
And that's what I find so inspiring about poor economics. It doesn't offer easy answers, but it gives us a framework for thinking about poverty in a more informed and compassionate way.
It's a call to action to engage with the issue in a more thoughtful and nuanced way. So as we wrap up this deep dive into poor economics, what's the one key message you want our listeners to walk away with?
That poverty is not inevitable. It's a solvable problem. But finding those solutions requires us to let go of those simplistic narratives and embrace a more data-driven, human-centered approach.
It's about understanding the realities of people's lives, respecting their agency, and empowering them to become the architects of their own futures. So if you're looking to deepen your understanding of this crucial issue and explore some truly groundbreaking ideas, Poor Economics is a must-read. It's a book that will challenge you, inspire you, and hopefully ignite a passion for making a real difference in the world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.